Dr. Alexei Novak had always prided himself on being prepared for the unexpected, which made his current predicament all the more irritating. The shuttle's emergency beacon blinked mockingly at him from beneath a twisted panel of what used to be sophisticated navigation equipment. 3 days ago, he'd been confidently explaining to his research team how ion storms were perfectly predictable phenomena with well-documented electromagnetic patterns. Now, surrounded by the ethereal blue glow of Zephyria 7's crystal formations, he was beginning to suspect that the universe had a sense of humor. Okay, Emergency Protocol 17B, he muttered to himself, wrestling with a tangle of fiber-optic cables that had somehow managed to tie themselves into what appeared to be a decorative knot. When primary communications fail, establish quantum entanglement link with, oh, right. The quantum transmitter is currently embedded in that rather artistic crater over there. The crystalline landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, each formation catching and refracting the pale light of Zephyria 7's twin suns. The effect was breathtaking, assuming one had time for aesthetic appreciation while slowly suffocating. Alexei's oxygen gauge cheerfully informed him that he had approximately 47 hours of breathable air remaining, which was precisely 46 hours and 59 minutes longer than he'd prefer to spend troubleshooting equipment with tools designed for a proper workshop, not emergency field repairs. He managed to extract his multi-tool without electrocuting himself, which felt like a small victory. The plasma cutter sparked to life with a satisfying hum, and he began carefully separating the fused components of his communication array. The work required delicate precision. One wrong cut and he'd transform his last hope of rescue into an expensive paperweight. Dr. Novak's first law of field repairs, he announced to the empty landscape, the probability of success is inversely proportional to how badly you need it to work. That's when the crystal formations around him suddenly erupted in cascades of bioluminescent patterns, pulsing with rhythmic waves of amber and crimson light. Alexei dropped his multi-tool and spun around, heart hammering. The patterns weren't random, they moved with purpose, spreading outward in concentric circles from where he stood. He'd triggered something, though he couldn't imagine what. His feet hadn't moved from the spot where he'd been working, and he certainly hadn't touched any of the nearby crystals. Oh, wonderful, he breathed, watching the light show intensify. First day on an alien moon and I've already broken something important. The warning patterns, for that's clearly what they were, painted the crystalline landscape in urgent hues. Alexei could hear a low harmonic resonance building, as if the moon itself was humming a note of displeasure. His scientific mind catalogued the phenomenon even as his survival instincts screamed at him to run. The crystals were responding to electromagnetic interference, possibly from his plasma cutter or the damaged shuttle components. He was witnessing a planetary defense mechanism, an elegant biological circuit board that spanned continents. Movement caught his eye, a figure approaching through the crystal maze with fluid, purposeful strides. Alexei's first thought was relief. Someone lived here, someone who might help. His second thought, as the figure drew closer, was confusion. She appeared human at first glance, but something about her proportions seemed slightly off, her movements too graceful for standard human physiology. She stopped perhaps 20 meters away, and Alexei got his first clear look at her. Definitely humanoid, definitely female, and definitely not entirely human. Her ears extended upward into elegant points that twitched and swiveled like organic sensor arrays, tracking sounds he couldn't even hear. Her clothing appeared to be woven from the same crystalline fibers that composed the landscape, shifting between translucency and opacity as she moved. Most notably, her hand rested on the hilt of what could only be described as a sword, though the blade seemed to be constructed from the same resonant crystal as the surrounding formations. She spoke, and the words came in a rapid, musical language that sounded like wind chimes arguing with a computer. When Alexei responded with his most apologetic expression and a helpless shrug, she frowned and switched to heavily accented standard. "You wake the guardian songs with your metal fire," she said, gesturing toward his dropped multi-tool. "Why do you disturb the harmony place?" "I'm sorry," Alexei said, raising his hands peacefully. "I didn't know I was disturbing anything. My Metal skyfish crashed, and I was trying to fix my communication device to call for help. She tilted her head, ears swiveling forward with obvious curiosity. Metal skyfish? My shuttle, he clarified, pointing toward the wreckage. The thing I was flying in when the ion storm hit. Ion storm, she repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. You ride the angry lights? Well, not intentionally. Usually we try to avoid them, but this one was unusually strong and... He trailed off, realizing he was probably over-explaining to someone whose grasp of standard was still developing. It was an accident. The bioluminescent warnings were beginning to fade, though the crystalline formation still hummed with residual energy. The woman, Zephyrian, he presumed, seemed to relax slightly, her hand moving away from her weapon. I am called Thysa, she said. You are, Lost Skyrider. Dar. Alexei Novak, he replied, then immediately wondered if titles had any meaning in her culture. Just Alexei is fine. And yes, very lost. Thysa approached his makeshift repair station, examining the scattered components with obvious fascination. She reached toward the multi-tool, then hesitated and looked at him questioningly. Go ahead, Alexei said. It's not dangerous when it's turned off. Well, mostly not dangerous. She picked up the device, turning it over in her hands with the careful attention of someone examining an artifact from an alien civilization. Which, he supposed, was exactly what she was doing. This makes metal fire, she asked. Plasma cutter. It uses controlled electromagnetic fields to generate a high-energy beam that can cut through most materials. He caught himself over-explaining again. It's a tool for fixing things. And this fixing tool woke the Guardian songs? Apparently. I'm guessing the electromagnetic emissions interfered with your harmony place. He gestured toward the still glowing crystals. Thysa nodded gravely. The crystal minds speak to each other with light songs and earth hums. Your metal fire sings too loudly, confuses the conversation. Crystal minds? Alexei's scientific curiosity immediately overrode his survival concerns. The formations are computational. Some kind of distributed processing network. She gave him a blank look, and he realized he'd slipped into technical jargon again. The crystals, think, he tried. Think, yes. Remember, yes. Dream, sometimes. She set down the multi-tool and pointed toward a particularly large formation that sparkled with intermittent patterns. That one dreams of the first builders, the ones who taught crystal minds to sing. Alexei felt his pulse quicken. A precursor civilization, possibly with advanced biotechnology integrated into the planetary geology. The xenobiology applications alone could revolutionize humanity's understanding of silicon-based consciousness. Then his oxygen gauge beeped a reminder, and he remembered that academic curiosity wouldn't help him if he suffocated before rescue arrived. Thysa, he said, I need to fix my communication device to call my people for help. Is there a way to do that without disturbing the harmony place? She considered this, ears twitching as she apparently listened to sounds beyond his perception. The crystal minds are curious about Skyriders. They ask if your people sing harmony or discord. I'd like to think we sing harmony, Alexei said carefully, though I suppose that depends on who's listening. Thysa smiled for the first time, and the expression transformed her face completely. A wise answer. The crystal minds approve of caution. She moved closer to his equipment, studying the tangled mess of circuits and fiber optics. Your metal fire tool is too loud, but perhaps there are quieter ways to mend broken songs. You know about technology. I know about harmony, she corrected. Metal songs, crystal songs, life songs, all must balance, or the music becomes noise. Alexei watched as she began carefully separating his components, her movements precise and purposeful. She seemed to understand the basic principles of his equipment without any formal technical training, approaching the repair work like a musician tuning an instrument rather than an engineer solving a problem. Your sky people will come looking for you, she asked as she worked. Eventually. The research vessel Meridian is scheduled to rendezvous with my shuttle in 6 days. When I don't show up at the designated coordinates, they'll begin search protocols. 6 days, Thysa repeated. Your breathing mixture lasts so long. Alexei glanced at his oxygen gauge again. Not exactly. More like 2 days, assuming I don't do anything strenuous. Thysa paused in her work, fixing him with an intense stare. Then we must help your dead box learn to sing again quickly. Dead box? She tapped the communication array. It should sing to your sky people, yes. But it is silent. Dead box. Despite everything, Alexei found himself chuckling. Dead box. I like that. Much more honest than emergency communication array. As Thysa continued her work, Alexei noticed she kept glancing around the crystal formations, her ears constantly swiveling to track sounds he couldn't detect. There was something protective in her posture, as if she was standing guard while performing the delicate repair work. Is there danger here? He asked. Always danger on Zephyria, 7, she said without looking up. Crystal hunters, harmonic storms, resonance feedbacks that can shatter minds. But you are under harmony protection now. Harmony protection. The crystal minds have decided you sing interesting songs, even if they are too loud. They will not let the dangerous singers harm you while you learn proper melody. Alexei wasn't entirely sure what that meant, but it sounded reassuring. As he watched Thysa work with his equipment, using intuitive understanding where he would have relied on technical manuals, he began to suspect that his crash landing on Zephyria, 7 might turn out to be far more significant than a simple rescue mission. The harmonious integration of biological and technological systems, the apparent consciousness of geological formations, and now this enigmatic woman who spoke of crystal mines and life songs. He was encountering concepts that could reshape humanity's understanding of intelligence itself. There, Thysa announced, stepping back from the now organized components. Your dead box still cannot sing, but the pieces no longer fight each other. Perhaps together we can teach it harmony. Alexei examined her work, impressed despite himself. She'd managed to separate and organize his equipment more efficiently than he would have managed with proper tools and a full technical crew. Thank you, he said. I think together we might just bring this dead box back to life. Thysa smiled again, that transformative expression that made her seem less alien and more familiar. Good. Skyrider Alexei's songs are too interesting to let fade to silence. As the twin suns of Zephyria, 7 began to set, painting the crystal formations in spectacular shades of gold and crimson, Alexei realized that his survival now depended on learning to harmonize with forces far more complex than simple mechanical failure. He was no longer just a stranded scientist waiting for rescue, he was a discordant note trying to find his place in a symphony he was only beginning to understand. The morning light on Zephyria, 7 had an unfortunate tendency to make everything look deceptively peaceful, which Alexei was beginning to recognize as the moon's equivalent of a practical joke. He'd spent the night huddled in his emergency shelter, listening to what Thysa cheerfully called night singers, crystalline formations that apparently held philosophical discussions in frequencies that made his teeth ache. Now, as he attempted to calibrate his emergency beacon using principles of quantum resonance that had seemed perfectly reasonable in the safety of a laboratory, the crystal formations around him were responding with what could only be described as electronic indigestion. The quantum field oscillations should create a stable resonance pattern, he muttered, adjusting the beacon's frequency modulator for the 15th time. Basic quantum mechanics, nothing revolutionary here. Thysa sat cross-legged nearby, watching his efforts with the patient amusement of someone observing a particularly entertaining species of wildlife. Her ears twitched occasionally, tracking sounds in the crystalline landscape that remained completely inaudible to him. Your dead box still speaks too loudly, she observed. The crystal mines complain of headaches. Crystal mines can get headaches? When forced to listen to quantum shouting, yes. She gestured toward a nearby formation that was pulsing with distinctly irritated patterns of red and orange. That one asks if all sky people are so musically challenged. Alexei paused in his adjustments. It's actually asking that. Not in words, but the meaning songs are clear. Thysa's expression grew thoughtful. Perhaps if you tried whispering instead of shouting? Quantum mechanics doesn't really have a whispering mode, Alexei said, then immediately wondered if that was actually true. The principles governing quantum entanglement operated on probability clouds and wave functions. Perhaps there was a way to generate a more subtle resonance pattern. Although, what if I tried pulse modulation instead of continuous broadcast? He began adjusting the beacon's output pattern, switching from a steady signal to short, rhythmic bursts. The surrounding crystals immediately shifted their color patterns from irritated orange to curious blue-green. Better, Thysa said, nodding approvingly. The crystal minds say your quantum whispers are almost melodic. Almost melodic isn't exactly the ringing endorsement I was hoping for, but I'll take it. Alexei fine-tuned the pulse frequency, watching as his improvised modifications slowly brought the beacon's output into harmony with the ambient crystal resonance. There. The signal should now propagate through the crystal network without causing too much. The beacon exploded in a shower of sparks and the acrid smell of overloaded circuits. Electromagnetic feedback, he finished lamely, watching smoke rise from what had been his best hope of contacting the meridian. Thysa tilted her head, ears swiveling forward. The crystal minds say your quantum whispers just became quantum screaming. I noticed. Alexei prodded the smoking remains of his beacon with a salvaged stylus. Back to the drawing board, which in this case is a pile of scrap metal and wishful thinking. Perhaps the problem is not with your tools, but with your understanding of the harmony laws, Thysa suggested. The crystal minds do not simply pass messages, they transform them, add their own songs to the melody. Your quantum whispers become part of their great conversation. Alexei looked up from his ruined equipment. Are you saying the crystal network is actively processing the signals? Like some kind of distributed computing system? Computing? Thysa frowned, struggling with the unfamiliar term. Thinking. Problem solving. Taking information and changing it into different information. Ah, yes. The crystal minds are always thinking, always changing songs into new songs. Why would they simply repeat your quantum whispers unchanged? The implications hit Alexei like a revelation. He'd been treating the crystal network as a passive transmission medium, when in fact he was dealing with an active, conscious system that was attempting to interpret and respond to his signals. No wonder his beacon had overloaded. He'd been trying to force a simple message through a network designed for complex, adaptive communication. Thysa, he said slowly, what would happen if I asked the crystal minds to help me send a message, instead of trying to force one through them? Her ears perked up with interest. That would be much more polite. The crystal minds appreciate courtesy. How exactly does one courteously request assistance from a geological formation? The same way one requests anything from a thinking being. You ask nicely and explain why the favor matters. Alexei stared at the nearest crystal formation, feeling slightly ridiculous. Hello, crystal mind. I'm stranded here, and my people are looking for me. Could you help me send them a message? The crystal pulsed with what might have been amusement, cycling through a rapid sequence of colors that somehow conveyed the impression of gentle laughter. Your request song needs more melody, Thysa said. The crystal minds respond to emotional harmony, not just word meanings. I'm a scientist, not a musician. The closest I get to emotional harmony is when my experimental results match my hypotheses. Then perhaps you need a translator. Thysa stood and approached the crystal formation, placing her palm against its surface. She began to speak in her own language, her voice rising and falling in patterns that seemed to match the crystal's luminous responses. The conversation, for that's clearly what it was, continued for several minutes, with the crystal's light patterns becoming increasingly animated. What are you telling them? Alexei asked. The truth, Thysa replied without breaking contact with the crystal. That you are a song seeker from the sky people, that you study the music of different worlds, and that your silence would leave your people's harmony incomplete. Song seeker. I like that better than xenobiology researcher. The crystal's patterns suddenly shifted to deep, resonant purple, and a low harmonic tone began building in the surrounding formations. Other crystals throughout the area began responding, creating a network of interconnected melodies that seemed to stretch to the horizon. They agree to help, Thysa announced, stepping back from the crystal. But they require a harmony price. What kind of price? They want to learn your people's songs in exchange for carrying your message. A cultural trade. Alexei considered this. I don't really know any songs. I mean, I can hum a few classical pieces, and I remember some old earth folk tunes my grandmother used to sing, but I'm hardly a representative of human musical culture. The crystal minds are not concerned with perfection, Thysa said. They value authenticity over skill. A song sung with true feeling carries more meaning than a perfect melody sung with an empty heart. Great. No pressure at all. Alexei cleared his throat and tried to remember the words to an old earth song his grandmother had taught him. His voice cracked slightly as he began to sing, feeling absurd but determined to try anything that might establish communication with his rescue ship. The crystals responded immediately, their light patterns shifting to match the rhythm and emotional tone of his song. As he continued, more formations joined the network, until the entire landscape seemed to pulse in time with his imperfect melody. When he finished, the silence stretched for a long moment before the crystals erupted in cascades of approving light. They say your song carries the taste of home longing and ancestor memory, Thysa translated. Very moving, though your pitch accuracy needs improvement. Even alien crystal minds are music critics, Alexei muttered. They also say they understand your message need now, and they will carry your call song to the sky people. But first. Thysa's expression grew serious, her ears swiveling toward something in the distance. We have visitors. Alexei followed her gaze and saw them approaching through the crystal maze, sleek, predatory shapes that seemed to be composed of the same crystalline material as the landscape itself, but moving with fluid, hunting purpose. There were at least 6 of them, possibly more, their forms shifting and refracting light in ways that made them difficult to count. Silicon-based predators, he asked, his scientific mind cataloging details even as his survival instinct screamed warnings. Crystal hunters, Thysa confirmed, her hand moving to her sword hilt. They are drawn by electromagnetic songs, especially new ones. Your quantum whispers have made you appetizing. Appetizing? They feed on energy patterns, absorb the songs of other beings. Very dangerous to thinking creatures. The nearest crystal hunter paused, its faceted form tilting as if listening to something. Then it began moving toward them with predatory intent, its crystalline surface resonating with a sound like breaking glass. Right, Alexei said, grabbing his plasma cutter. Time for some practical xenobiology. You cannot fight crystal hunters with metal fire, Thysa warned, drawing her blade. They absorb energy, use it to grow stronger. Then what do we do? We outsing them. Thysa's sword began to hum with harmonic frequencies, the crystal blade resonating in counterpoint to the approaching hunters. Crystal hunters are primitive minds, all hunger and no harmony. They cannot process complex melodies. So we confuse them with music. We overwhelm them with beauty. Thysa raised her sword, and the blade's song grew more complex, weaving intricate patterns that made the nearest crystal hunter stumble and shake its head in apparent confusion. But I need your voice, song seeker. One melody is not enough. Alexei looked at the approaching predators, then at Thysa standing ready to defend him with nothing but a singing sword and centuries of warrior training. He thought about quantum mechanics and harmonic resonance and the absurd situation he'd found himself in, stranded on an alien moon where geology thought and music was a weapon. Any requests, he asked, raising his voice to join her blade song. Something with feeling, Thysa replied, her ears twitching with what might have been amusement despite the danger. The crystal hunters have no defense against emotions they cannot understand. As the predators closed in, Alexei began to sing again, his voice joining with Thysa's weapon song and the crystalline's supportive harmonies. The music that resulted was unlike anything he'd ever heard, part human longing, part alien warrior chant, part geological consciousness exploring the concept of melody. The crystal hunters slowed, then stopped, their primitive minds unable to process the complexity of the combined songs. "Is it working?" Alexei asked between verses. "Keep singing," Thysa replied, stepping closer to him as her blade wove protective harmonies around them both. "They are confused, but not defeated. We must out-beautiful them until they lose interest in our energy songs." And so they stood in the crystalline landscape of Zephyria, 7, a human scientist and an alien warrior, singing predators into submission while an entire moon listened with the patient attention of a consciousness vast beyond human comprehension. Alexei reflected that this was definitely not covered in any of his xenobiology textbooks, but then again, the best discoveries usually weren't. The underground cavern system beneath Zephyria, 7 turned out to be less cave and more crystal cathedral designed by a mathematician having fever dreams. Alexei followed Thysa through passages where the walls curved according to principles that made his physics training weep quietly in the corner of his mind. Everything here glowed with soft, internal light, creating a landscape that was simultaneously beautiful and deeply unsettling to anyone accustomed to Euclidean geometry. "Your people built these tunnels?" he asked, running his hand along a wall that somehow managed to be both solid crystal and flowing liquid at the same time. "Not built," Thysa corrected, her ears twitching as she navigated by sounds he couldn't detect. "Grown. The first builders taught the crystal mines to shape themselves into useful forms. These passages are the moon's circulatory system." "The moon has a circulatory system? How else would it think?" "Blood carries thoughts in your body, energy flow carries thoughts in crystal bodies." Alexei paused to examine a section of wall where veins of luminescent material pulsed in steady rhythms that reminded him uncomfortably of a heartbeat. "So we're essentially walking through the bloodstream of a conscious geological formation." "Walking is not accurate," Thysa said with amusement. "We are more like nutrients being absorbed." "That's not disturbing at all." They'd been traveling for hours through the crystal circulatory system, following Thysa's promised route to what she called the deep memory chambers. According to her, the precursor civilization had left behind more than just architectural crystal mines. They'd created repositories of living knowledge that could interface directly with organic consciousness. The idea simultaneously thrilled and terrified Alexei's scientific sensibilities. "Tell me again why we couldn't just stay on the surface and wait for my rescue ship," he asked, ducking under a formation that looked like crystallized lightning. "Because your quantum songs have attracted attention from the Harmony Destroyers," Thysa explained patiently. "Surface is no longer safe for loud-thinking beings." "Harmony Destroyers? Creatures that feed on discord, grow strong from broken songs. Your rescue people will sing even louder than you when they arrive. Without proper harmony protection, they will draw every destroyer on this hemisphere." Alexei considered this. "So we're going deeper underground to find ancient alien technology that might help us establish some kind of protective, harmony field." "You understand quickly for a loud thinker," Thysa said approvingly. "I try. Though I have to ask, why are you helping me? I mean, I appreciate it enormously, but harboring stranded aliens can't be standard Zephyrian policy." Thysa's ears flattened slightly, and she was quiet for several steps before answering. "The crystal mines say your songs carry potential for new harmonies. They are curious about sky people music, want to learn if your people can sing beauty or only noise." "And what do you think?" "I think," Thysa said carefully, "that your songs become more beautiful when you forget to think so loudly about making them perfect." Before Alexei could parse the implications of that statement, they emerged into a vast chamber that made the surface crystal formations look like amateur attempts at architecture. The space curved away in all directions, its boundaries lost in shifting patterns of light and shadow. Floating throughout the chamber were structures that defied every principle of engineering Alexei had ever learned, crystalline constructs that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in dimensions his brain refused to acknowledge. "Welcome to the deep memory place," Thysa announced. "Here, the first builders stored their greatest songs. Those are information storage devices." Alexei stared at the nearest floating construct, which was simultaneously a perfect geometric solid and a flowing organic shape that hurt to look at directly. "Memory crystals, yes. But not like your dead box memories. These live, dream, respond to the songs of those who approach them. Biotechnological quantum storage with consciousness-responsive interfaces," Alexei breathed. "This is impossible. The energy requirements alone would." A pulse of amused light from the nearest memory crystal interrupted his technical analysis. "It says your understanding songs are entertaining but incomplete," Thysa translated. "First builder technology works with harmony laws, not force laws." "Harmony laws? The deeper patterns that connect all things. Your people study how to make matter obey will. First builders learned how to make matter want to cooperate." Alexei approached one of the memory crystals cautiously, noting how its structure seemed to shift in response to his presence. "How do we interface with it? Do I just ask it questions?" "First you must prove you can hear its songs," Thysa said. "Memory crystals only share knowledge with beings capable of true listening. And how does one prove they're capable of true listening?" "By listening truly," Thysa said with the kind of circular logic that made Alexei suspect she was either very wise or gently mocking him. "Place your hand on the crystal surface and open your mind to harmonies beyond your current understanding." Alexei reached toward the floating construct, then hesitated. "This isn't going to scramble my brain, is it? Because I'm rather fond of my current neural configuration." "The crystal mines promise not to damage your thinking songs permanently," Thysa said. "Though they make no guarantees about temporary confusion. Temporary confusion is basically my natural state anyway." Alexei placed his palm against the memory crystal's surface. The contact was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Information flowed into his consciousness not as data streams or visual displays, but as pure understanding that bypassed his sensory processing entirely. He saw, felt, knew the history of Zephyria, 7 in ways that transcended normal learning. The first builders hadn't been a separate species but rather the evolved descendants of the crystal mines themselves, organic consciousness that had learned to interface directly with silicon-based awareness. Their technology wasn't built but grown, developed through patient collaboration between biological and geological intelligence over millions of years. "This is incredible," he gasped, though the words felt inadequate. They achieved perfect symbiosis between organic and inorganic consciousness. The implications for consciousness theory alone, the memory crystal pulsed with what felt like gentle amusement, and suddenly Alexei's mind was flooded with warnings about approaching danger. The harmony destroyers were moving through the crystal network, drawn by the resonance of the memory crystal activation. Worse, they were learning, adapting their feeding patterns to the new harmonic frequencies his presence had introduced to the system. "Thysa," he said urgently, "we have a problem. The destroyers aren't just random predators, they're evolving in response to the changes we've made to the crystal network." "Evolving how?" "They're developing the ability to mimic harmonic patterns, disguising their discord as harmony. The crystal minds won't be able to distinguish between helpful and harmful songs much longer." Thysa's expression grew grave. "If the destroyers learn to sing false harmony, the entire network could be corrupted. The deep memory chambers would become feeding grounds. Can we stop it?" "Perhaps." Thysa moved to another memory crystal, placing both hands on its surface with practiced ease. The first builders faced similar threats. They developed harmony locks, protective patterns that could identify true harmony from false. Harmony locks? Songs that can only be sung by beings capable of genuine cooperation. Destroyers cannot mimic what they cannot understand. The memory crystal Thysa was interfacing with began projecting complex patterns of light and sound into the chamber. Alexei felt the information flowing into his consciousness through his own crystal contact, instructions for creating a harmonic defense system that required perfect synchronization between organic minds. "I see the problem," he said. "The harmony lock requires two consciousness types working in perfect emotional resonance. The first builders could do it because they'd evolved together over millions of years. But we've known each other for 3 days. Time is not the only path to harmony," Thysa said softly. "Sometimes understanding can develop in moments when necessity demands it." "What kind of understanding?" "The kind that comes when one being chooses to trust another completely, despite all logical reasons for caution." Alexei looked at her standing beside her memory crystal, bathed in the ethereal light of ancient knowledge. Her ears twitched forward with concentration as she processed information from a civilization that predated human space travel by epochs. He thought about how she'd stood between him and the crystal hunters, how she'd patiently translated his crude attempts at communication with the crystal minds, how she'd guided him through dangers he couldn't even perceive. "You're talking about more than just technical cooperation," he realized. "Harmony locks require emotional authenticity," Thysa confirmed. "The patterns cannot be faked or forced. Both participants must open their inner songs completely to the other." "And you're willing to do that? With a loud-thinking sky person you barely know?" Thysa smiled, and the expression carried depths of meaning that transcended language barriers. "Your songs may be loud, Alexei, but they are honest. And honest songs, even imperfect ones, are always worth harmonizing with." The chamber around them began to pulse with increasing urgency as the harmony destroyers drew closer. Alexei could feel their approach through the crystal network, discordant notes that sought to unravel the delicate symphonies that kept Zephyria 7's consciousness stable. "All right," he said, taking a deep breath. "How do we create a harmony lock?" "We sing together," Thysa said simply. "Not just with voices, but with everything we are. No barriers, no protective distance, no fear of being truly heard." "I've never been particularly good at opening up emotionally," Alexei admitted. "Most of my relationships involve theoretical particles and mathematical equations." "Then pretend I am a particularly complex equation that requires your complete attention to solve," Thysa suggested with amusement that somehow made the terrifying prospect seem manageable. As the harmony destroyer's discordant approach grew stronger, Alexei reached for Thysa's hand while maintaining contact with his memory crystal. The moment their fingers intertwined, the chamber erupted in cascades of light as two very different consciousness types began learning to sing in perfect harmony. "Here goes nothing," Alexei said. "Here goes everything," Thysa corrected, and began to sing. The harmony that emerged from their combined voices transcended anything either could have produced alone, human longing and curiosity blending with Zephyrian warrior grace and crystal deep wisdom. As their song grew stronger, the memory crystals throughout the chamber began responding, adding their ancient melodies to the growing symphony. The harmony lock was forming, a protective pattern so complex and beautiful that it could only be maintained by beings willing to trust each other with their deepest emotional truths. Alexei realized that somewhere in the process of learning to harmonize with Thysa, he'd stopped thinking of her as an alien guide and started thinking of her as something else entirely. The harmony lock held for exactly 47 minutes before everything went catastrophically wrong in the most scientifically fascinating way possible. Alexei had been monitoring the protective resonance patterns through his crystal interface when the ancient precursor communication array suddenly activated itself, flooding the chamber with enough electromagnetic energy to power a small city. The memory crystals began spinning frantically, their usual serene glow shifting to urgent crimson warnings that needed no translation. "I'm guessing this isn't part of the normal harmony lock procedure," Alexei said, watching streams of data cascade through his consciousness as the array came fully online. "The deep memory chambers are responding to your rescue people's approach," Thysa announced, her connection to the crystal network providing real-time information. "Their quantum songs are so loud the entire moon is waking up. The meridian found me. That's wonderful. That's... Alexei paused as more information flooded through the crystal interface. Oh. That's potentially catastrophic. The research vessel's standard scanning protocols were bombarding Zephyria 7 with high-energy sensor sweeps that the crystal mines interpreted as aggressive territorial challenges. In response, the moon's ancient defense systems, dormant for millions of years, were systematically activating. Massive crystalline constructs were emerging from underground chambers throughout the hemisphere, their purpose unmistakably military despite their breathtaking beauty. The crystal sentinels believe your sky people are harmony destroyers, Thysa explained, her ears flattened with concern. They are preparing to cleanse the surface of all organic contamination. Cleanse? Alexei felt his stomach drop. As in, sterilize. As in, turn everything living into charcoal. The first builders programmed the sentinels to protect the crystal mines from any threat that could not be reasoned with. Your rescue people's quantum songs are too discordant for communication. Alexei watched through the crystal interface as the Meridian's shuttles launched, carrying his research team toward what they believed was a routine extraction mission. Captain Morrison would be following standard protocols, completely unaware that she was leading her crew into a confrontation with weapons technology that predated human civilization by geological ages. "We have to stop this," he said. "Both sides are trying to help me, and they're about to destroy each other through complete mutual misunderstanding." "The harmony lock can be expanded," Thysa said thoughtfully. "If we can establish resonance between the crystal sentinels and your sky people, the threat songs might become cooperation songs." "How do we translate, 'Please don't incinerate my friends' into crystal harmony language?" "We become the translation," Thysa replied, moving toward the chamber's central memory crystal. "The harmony lock we created proves that sky people and crystal minds can sing together. If we can broadcast that proof through the network, we turn ourselves into a diplomatic broadcast system," Alexei finished. "Brilliant. Also completely insane, but I've grown fond of insane solutions." They positioned themselves at the chamber's central crystal, which had grown to 3 times its original size in response to the escalating crisis. Alexei could feel its consciousness pressing against his mind. Ancient, vast, and currently very confused about whether humans represented an evolutionary step forward or a cosmic mistake that needed correction. "This is going to require complete harmonic integration," Thysa warned. "No barriers, no holding back. The crystal minds must understand not just our individual songs, but the harmony we create together. So we're essentially volunteering to become an interspecies music demonstration while ancient alien weapons systems decide whether to vaporize my colleagues." "That is an accurate summary, yes." Alexei took her hand, feeling the now familiar tingle of harmonic resonance beginning to build between them. "For the record, this is definitely not how I imagined my first contact mission would go." "How did you imagine it?" "More formal protocols, less singing for our lives, significantly fewer emotionally authentic declarations of trust." Thysa's ears twitched with amusement. "Your people have much to learn about proper first contact procedures." As they began their expanded harmony song, the memory crystal responded by opening communication channels throughout the entire crystal network. Alexei felt his consciousness stretching across continents, touching the minds of crystal sentinels that were older than multicellular life on Earth. Their thoughts were slow, patient, and absolutely lethal in their protective devotion to the crystal minds they'd been created to defend. Through the network, he could sense the Meridian's approach, Captain Morrison's measured concern as the planet's surface erupted with obviously artificial constructs, Dr. Yates's excitement at discovering evidence of advanced alien technology, Engineer Kowalski's practical worry about the energy readings his sensors were detecting. They were good people, brilliant people, and they were about to become collateral damage in a misunderstanding of cosmic proportions. "The Sentinels require proof that sky people can contribute to universal harmony instead of disrupting it," Thysa reported, her voice strained from the effort of maintaining connection with entities whose thoughts moved at geological speeds. "What kind of proof?" "The kind that can only be demonstrated, not explained." Alexei understood. Through their harmony lock, he and Thysa were showing the crystal network what cooperation between different types of consciousness could achieve. But that was just one human and one Zephyrian. The Sentinels needed to believe that his entire species was capable of harmonic integration. "I need to contact the Meridian," he said. "Get them to stop their scanning protocols and start singing." "Can your sky people sing?" "Not in the traditional sense. But they're scientists, they understand resonance, harmony, mathematical relationships. If I can explain what's needed." The memory crystal pulsed with sudden understanding, and Alexei felt the ancient communication array lock onto the Meridian's transmission frequency. Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the crystal interface, distorted but audible. "Dr. Novak? Alexei, is that you? Your signal is coming from impossible coordinates. Are you underground?" "Captain Morrison, I need you to listen very carefully," Alexei said, hoping his words were being transmitted clearly. "The planet is conscious. Your scanning protocols are being interpreted as threats. I need everyone to stop all active sensors immediately and switch to passive observation only. The planet is conscious. Alexei, are you experiencing oxygen deprivation symptoms?" "I'm experiencing alien first contact symptoms, which are considerably more complex." "Captain, the surface constructs you're seeing are defensive weapons. They're deciding whether to classify us as a threat or a potential ally." "Based on what criteria?" "Based on whether we can prove we're capable of harmony instead of discord. I need everyone on the ship to synchronize their equipment to emit a coordinated resonance pattern. Think of it as singing in chorus with the planet itself." There was a long pause during which Alexei could practically hear Captain Morrison weighing the insanity of his request against the evidence of ancient alien technology surrounding her ship. "Dr. Novak," she said finally, "please tell me you have a scientific basis for this recommendation." "The consciousness inhabiting this moon operates on principles of harmonic resonance rather than adversarial conflict," Alexei explained, while simultaneously maintaining his harmony lock with Thysa and the crystal network. "It literally cannot understand the concept of mutually beneficial cooperation unless it's demonstrated through synchronized harmonic patterns." "You're asking us to sing to a planet. I'm asking you to prove we're worth not incinerating." Another pause, during which Alexei could sense the crystal sentinel's growing impatience through the network. "All stations, this is the captain," Morrison's voice came through clearly. "Prepare for synchronized resonance emission. Dr. Yates, I need you to calculate harmonic frequencies based on the planet's electromagnetic baseline. Mr. Kowalski, configure all systems to emit coordinated pulses rather than scanning sweeps. Everyone else, try to think harmonious thoughts." "Harmonious thoughts," came Dr. Yates's incredulous voice. "You heard the man. We're proving we can sing in tune with an alien consciousness. Today's definitely going in my logbook as unprecedented procedures required for diplomatic contact." As the Meridian's crew began implementing the most unusual first contact protocol in human history, Alexei felt the Crystal Sentinel's attention shift from aggressive preparation to curious observation. The research vessel's coordinated harmonic emissions weren't beautiful by Zephyrian standards, but they demonstrated intentional cooperation, multiple minds working together toward a shared goal. "It's working," Thysa said, her voice filled with wonder. "The Sentinels recognize the harmony patterns in your Sky People's songs. They're beginning to understand that humans can learn proper cooperation. And the weapons systems? Standing down. The crystal minds have decided your people show potential for positive contribution to universal harmony." Alexei felt tension he hadn't realized he was carrying drain out of his shoulders. "So we're not going to be sterilized?" "Not today," Thysa said with amusement. "Though the crystal minds reserve the right to reconsider if future human visitors sing too loudly." As the immediate crisis resolved, Alexei became aware of changes in himself that went far beyond mere survival relief. 3 days ago, he'd been a xenobiologist who studied alien life forms as fascinating but ultimately separate phenomena. Now, he was someone who had learned to harmonize his thoughts and emotions with an entirely different type of consciousness, someone who had discovered that true understanding required vulnerability as much as knowledge. Thysa, he said, still maintaining their connection through the crystal interface, when my people arrive to extract me, what happens to this? He gestured between them, encompassing the harmony lock and everything it represented. The harmony songs we've created together will remain in the crystal mind's memory, she said. They will study them, learn from them, perhaps use them as templates for future cooperation between our peoples. That's not what I meant. Thysa's ears drooped slightly. I know what you meant. The Meridian's mission continues for another 6 months. We're studying consciousness emergence in silicon-based systems. Which, as it turns out, was a laughably incomplete understanding of what we'd find here. I could request extended leave, establish a proper first contact research station. Your people would allow this? My people just spent 20 minutes singing to a planet on my recommendation. I think they're ready to admit that conventional xenobiology protocols might need some revision. Thysa's smile could have powered the entire crystal network. The crystal mines would be honored to host a permanent harmony research station. They have many songs they would like to share with sky people who can listen properly. And you? Would you be willing to serve as cultural liaison? Primary harmony consultant? I'm sure we can invent an appropriately diplomatic title. I would be honored to continue our harmony studies, Thysa said formally, then grinned. Though I insist on proper payment in the form of more Earth ancestor songs. The crystal mines found your grandmother's melody surprisingly sophisticated. As the Meridian's shuttles descended toward the crystal landscape, guided by harmonic beacon songs rather than standard navigation protocols, Alexei reflected on the transformation of what should have been a routine research mission into something unprecedented in human history. He was no longer just a scientist studying alien phenomena. He was a bridge between different types of consciousness, someone who had learned that the universe's greatest discoveries often came not from analysis but from the courage to truly listen. You don't need to protect me, he'd told Thysa when the crystal hunters first appeared. Now he understood that protection wasn't about standing between someone and danger, it was about creating harmony strong enough to transform discord into beauty. And that kind of harmony, once established, could resonate across species, across worlds, across the vast symphonies of consciousness that connected all thinking beings. The shuttles touched down with mechanical precision on the crystalline landing site the Zephyrian network had prepared for them, and Alexei felt the beginnings of a new chapter in human understanding. The universe, it turned out, was far more ready for harmony than anyone had dared to hope. Ready to introduce my colleagues to crystal mind diplomacy, he asked Thysa. Ready to teach them proper harmony singing, she corrected. This should be entertaining. Hand in hand, they walked toward the landing shuttles, carrying between them the songs of two worlds learning to sing together.